What if the reason you feel exhausted isn't because you're failing at self-improvement, but because you're succeeding at it? What if becoming better is the very thing that's making you feel broken? And what if, without noticing, self-improvement quietly turned into self-rejection? Take a moment and look around. We're living in the era of optimization. Podcasts at 1.5x speed, 5 a.m. morning routines, cold plunges, dopamine detoxes, journaling prompts telling you how to rewire your mind, productivity apps measuring your sleep, your steps, your focus, even your emotions. Everyone is working on themselves. Everyone is healing. Everyone is upgrading. And yet, so many people feel tired in a way sleep doesn't fix, burned out in a way motivation doesn't touch, disconnected in a way success can't heal. You're doing all the right things. Reading the books, watching the videos, taking the notes, trying to be more disciplined, more aware, more evolved. So why do you still feel like you're not enough? Why does growth feel heavy instead of freeing? Why does self-improvement sometimes feel like pressure instead of peace? Here's the uncomfortable truth most self-help content never talks about. At a certain point, self-improvement stops being about growth and starts being about fixing what you believe is wrong with you. And that belief is what slowly burns you out. This video is not here to give you another habit, not another routine, not another system to optimize your life. Instead, we're going to explore 8 hidden ways self-improvement quietly exhausts you and how to recognize when growth turns into self-rejection. More importantly, you'll learn how to shift from constantly fixing yourself to finally being with yourself. Because the real transformation doesn't happen when you try harder. It happens when you stop treating yourself like a problem. Let's start with the first illusion. Why does working on yourself often feel like running from yourself? At first, self-improvement feels hopeful. You pick up a book, you listen to a podcast, you think, finally, I'm doing something good for myself. But slowly something shifts. Without realizing it, the motivation behind improvement changes. It stops coming from curiosity and starts coming from quiet dissatisfaction. There's an unspoken belief hiding underneath all that effort. I need to improve because who I am right now isn't enough. And that belief changes everything. Real growth feels like expansion. It feels like becoming more spacious inside yourself, more tolerant, more honest, more alive. But self-rejection feels different. Self-rejection feels like constant correction, like you're always editing yourself, always monitoring, always asking, how can I be better? But never asking, am I okay as I am? This is where many people get stuck. They read self-help books one after another. They highlight passages, they take notes, they nod along. And yet, no matter how much they learn, they never feel satisfied. There's always another flaw to fix, another habit to optimize, another mindset to rewire. Instead of asking, what am I experiencing right now? They keep asking, what's wrong with me? That question alone can quietly drain you. Because when every emotion becomes a problem to solve, you stop listening to yourself and start managing yourself. This is one of the most common mistakes in modern self-improvement, using growth as a way to avoid discomfort. Feeling sad? You try to reframe it. Feeling jealous? You shame yourself for not being evolved enough. Feeling tired? You push harder and call it discipline. But emotions aren't obstacles, they're information. When you use self-help to escape your inner experience instead of meeting it, growth turns into self-erasure. You don't learn how to be with yourself, you learn how to override yourself. And over time, that creates a subtle but deep exhaustion. Here's the small but crucial shift most people miss. Self-improvement should come after self-acceptance, not before it. Acceptance doesn't mean giving up. It means you stop treating your current self like a mistake, because improvement without acceptance doesn't lead to wholeness. It leads to fragmentation. You become a project, not a person. And once that happens, burnout isn't a failure. It's a signal that growth has turned into self-rejection. Now here's where it gets even more complicated. Because this mindset doesn't just live in your thoughts, it gets reinforced by the culture around you. And that brings us to the next illusion, the one that disguises exhaustion as healing itself. When healing becomes another job, burnout is guaranteed. In American culture, effort is a virtue, discipline is respected, grinding is admired. So when self-improvement entered the mainstream, it didn't come alone. It arrived carrying the language of hustle culture with it. Do the work, stay disciplined, no excuses. At first, those phrases sound empowering. They make you feel responsible, in control, capable. But over time, healing starts to feel less like care and more like performance. You begin to track everything: your habits, your moods, your sleep, your focus, your progress. You don't just want to feel better, you want to optimize feeling better. Meditation stops being a space to breathe and becomes a tool to increase productivity. Therapy stops being a place to explore and becomes something you want to fix quickly. Journaling isn't about honesty anymore. It's about improvement. Writing the right insight, finding the right breakthrough, becoming better, faster, and slowly without realizing it, healing becomes another job you're trying not to fail at. Here's the problem. True healing is slow. It's uneven. It doesn't follow timelines or streaks. Some weeks you feel clear, other weeks you feel lost again. Sometimes progress looks like moving forward. Sometimes it looks like resting or even falling apart. Hustle healing can't tolerate that. Hustle healing demands consistency, control, visible progress. It turns emotions into metrics, and when you can't maintain them, you don't need rest. You think, I'm doing it wrong. This is where burnout begins. Not because you're lazy, not because you lack discipline, but because you're never allowed to rest as who you are, only as who you're trying to become. There's a quiet violence in that. When rest feels like weakness, when slowness feels like failure, when your nervous system is never off duty. You might look functional on the outside, but inside your system is constantly bracing, always trying, always adjusting, always improving. Healing was never meant to feel like a performance review. It was meant to feel like safety. And safety doesn't come from doing more. It comes from being allowed to stop, to pause without guilt, to feel without fixing, to exist without optimizing. If this part resonates, it's not because you're broken. It's because you've been trying to heal inside a culture that doesn't know how to slow down. And when you combine that culture with self-improvement, something even more damaging can happen. Because once healing becomes a performance, you don't just compete with yourself. You start comparing yourself to everyone else. And that's the next illusion. Why does inspiration so often turn into shame? You open your phone, just for a moment, tell yourself you're looking for motivation, and there it is. Perfect morning routines, calm, confident voices explaining how they healed, soft lighting, centered faces, people who seem grounded, present, already whole. At first, it feels inspiring. Maybe I can get there too. But then something subtle happens. Your body tightens. Your chest sinks a little. A quiet thought appears. Why am I not there yet? Here's the part most people don't realize. Your nervous system doesn't clearly distinguish between that's inspiring and I'm behind. It just feels pressure. Psychologically, comparison is not neutral. It's an identity threat. The moment growth turns into a race, self-worth becomes something you can lose. You're no longer asking, what is unfolding for me? You're asking, why am I slower than everyone else? And that question carries shame. People rarely say it out loud, but many think it quietly. They healed faster than me. They're more disciplined. They seem so calm. Why am I still struggling? The algorithm doesn't help. Social media compresses timelines. You see the breakthrough, not the years of confusion. The insight, not the breakdowns. The clarity, not the nights they thought nothing was working. So your mind fills in the gaps and assumes you're failing. This is how self-improvement turns into quiet self-hatred. Not dramatic, not obvious, just a constant sense of falling short. You start monitoring yourself more closely, judging your progress, comparing your inner chaos to someone else's curated peace. And slowly, growth stops feeling personal, it becomes competitive. But growth was never meant to be synchronized. Healing doesn't move on a universal timeline. It moves on a nervous system timeline, a history timeline, a safety timeline. Two people can do the same practices and unfold at completely different speeds, Not because one is better, but because their systems carry different stories. When you forget that, comparison becomes punishment. Punishment for being human, for taking time, for having layers that need patience, not pressure. Here's the small reframe that changes everything. Growth is not about being ahead, it's about being honest with where you are. The moment you stop comparing, you don't lose motivation, you gain permission. Permission to move at your own pace. Permission to rest without falling behind. Permission to grow without turning against yourself. But comparison isn't the only way growth becomes hostile. Sometimes the problem isn't who you're comparing yourself to. It's how relentlessly you're trying to fix yourself at all. And that brings us to the next illusion. What if nothing is actually wrong with you? That question alone can feel uncomfortable. Because for many people, self-improvement has trained them to believe that every inner experience needs to be fixed. Feeling sad, you should reframe it. Feeling tired? Optimize your sleep, your diet, your routine. Feeling lost? You must be missing a plan, so instead of allowing yourself to just be, you immediately go into correction mode. Emotion becomes a problem. Rest becomes inefficiency. Confusion becomes failure. But here's what rarely gets said. Feelings are not bugs in the system. They are signals. Sadness is often a signal of loss or unmet needs. Fatigue is often a signal of overload. Feeling lost is often a signal that something old no longer fits. When you rush to fix these signals, you don't actually listen to them. You override them. This is where another common mistake appears. Over-intellectualizing emotions. You know your trauma history. You understand your attachment style. You can explain exactly why you react the way you do. And yet, when the emotion shows up in real time, you don't allow it space. Instead of feeling, you analyze. Instead of resting, you diagnose. Instead of being present, you interpret. Knowledge becomes a shield. This is especially common among people who are highly self-aware. They don't lack insight. They lack permission to be vulnerable with themselves. I've seen this again and again. People who can name every wound but never let themselves cry. People who understand their patterns but still judge themselves for having them. People who speak the language of healing but don't extend that same kindness inward. Self-compassion gets misunderstood here. Many people fear that if they stop fixing, they'll stop growing. But self-compassion isn't giving up. It's not complacency. It's not letting yourself stay stuck. It's creating a foundation where change can actually happen. Without compassion, growth feels like pressure. With compassion, growth feels like support. When you treat yourself with understanding instead of urgency, your system softens. And a softened system can learn, adapt, and heal. Endless fixing keeps you tense. Compassion gives you room. And here's the quiet truth behind burnout. You can't sustainably change in an environment that feels hostile, even if that environment is inside your own mind. So if you've been trying to improve yourself relentlessly and still feel exhausted, it may not be because you haven't done enough. It may be because you haven't been gentle enough. And when compassion is missing, there's one final consequence that almost always follows. Because growth without compassion doesn't just tire you out, it overloads your system completely. And that's where burnout fully takes hold. Why does doing everything right still feel wrong? You've learned so much, you've gained insight, you understand yourself better than ever. So why does your body still feel tense? Why do you still feel on edge, overwhelmed, or emotionally exhausted? Here's the piece most self-improvement content leaves out. Growth is not the same as integration. Growth is understanding. Integration is embodiment. Growth lives in your mind. Integration lives in your nervous system. You can intellectually understand your patterns. But if your body hasn't learned safety yet, nothing truly changes. This is why so many people feel stuck. They understand boundaries, but feel guilty every time they set one. They believe in self-love, but don't feel safe relaxing into it. They know they're allowed to rest, but their body stays braced, as if something bad will happen if they stop. That's not a mindset issue. That's a nervous system issue. Your nervous system doesn't respond to insight alone. It responds to felt safety. It learns through repetition, slowness, and experience, not through pressure or intellectual effort. When growth moves faster than integration, your system can't keep up. And when your system can't keep up, it goes into overload. That overload is burnout. Not because you didn't understand enough, but because you tried to apply understanding without letting your body catch up. Imagine upgrading software without upgrading the hardware. At some point, the system crashes. Burnout isn't a lack of motivation, it's a protective response. Your body saying, I can't keep living at this pace. I can't keep performing healing. I need safety, not more strategies. This is why adding more tools doesn't help. More routines, more techniques, more frameworks. They all ask something of you. But what if what you actually need is permission? Permission to move slower. Permission to be inconsistent. Permission to integrate in your own time. Integration looks like saying no and letting the discomfort pass. Resting without explaining yourself. Letting emotions rise without fixing them. Allowing your body to learn gradually that you're not in danger. This is how healing becomes sustainable. Not by doing more, but by letting your system soften. So if you're burned out from self-improvement, listen carefully. You don't need another method. You don't need more discipline. You don't need to try harder. You need more permission to be human. And once you begin giving yourself that permission, something profound shifts. Because growth no longer feels like pressure. It starts to feel like presence. And that's where the conversation truly changes. From fixing yourself to finally allowing yourself to live. If there's one thing to remember from this video, it's this. Self-improvement becomes dangerous when it's fueled by rejection, not care. The moment growth is driven by the belief that you're not enough, it stops being supportive and starts being corrosive. So maybe the question isn't, how do I become better? Maybe the real question is simpler and harder. Can I stay with myself here? Can I allow this moment without rushing to fix it? Can growth include rest, slowness, and kindness, not just effort? Because real growth doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like alignment. Think of growth like a garden. You don't yell at the soil for not producing faster. You don't shame the seed for taking its time. You don't force the flower to bloom. You create the conditions. You give water. You give light. You give space. And then you wait. Self-improvement at its healthiest works the same way. It's not about forcing yourself into a better version. It's about creating an inner environment where change can happen naturally, without violence, without urgency, without self-betrayal. If you've been burned out, it doesn't mean you failed at growth. It might mean you've been trying to grow in an environment that never felt safe. So before you add another habit, another routine, another rule, pause. Notice how you're treating yourself. Because the most radical form of growth might not be doing more. It might be allowing yourself to be. If this resonated, tell me in the comments. Has self-improvement helped you or exhausted you? And if you're looking for a different conversation about growth, one that doesn't burn you out, subscribe. We're not here to fix you. We're here to understand you. And maybe the next level of growth isn't becoming someone new. It's finally letting yourself be.